When facing difficult situations, we can often feel lost in confusion and stress. R.A.I.N, R-A.I.N, is a powerful acronym often used in the mindfulness tradition as a way to help navigate our way through intense emotions and experience. In this podcast, I will share the 4-step process of R.A.I.N as a way to change the game. Hey guys, thank you for watching this video. Make sure that you press subscribe and to click on the link to get 3 amazing classes: Power Yoga, Yin Yoga, and Meditation, to increase that strength, flexibility, and calm. All right, let's jump into the video. Welcome to episode number 82 of the Be Ultimate podcast, using R.A.I.N to change the game. Thanks for tuning in this week for another episode. Make sure that you hit that subscribe button, and as always, greatly appreciate your comments, your reviews. Throw some stars if you're listening on one of the many platforms that host the podcast, Google Play or Apple Podcasts as well. So this week, I want to share with you some powerful teachings, and this teaching revolves around something that's come out of the mindfulness movement called R.A.I.N, R-A.I.N, which was first coined by Michelle McDonald about 20 years ago. Now, I first heard about R.A.I.N through one of my meditation teachers, mentors, Tara Brach. And Tara Brach, if you're unfamiliar with her, is an amazing teacher, and I highly recommend her books. And she also has a great podcast and travels really around the country and around the world teaching mindfulness and meditation. So R.A.I.N is this 4-step process that helps us bring compassion to ourselves during intense experiences, challenging and real difficult emotions, times of upheaval and crisis. As the Dalai Lama said, if you want others to be happy, practice compassion. If you want to be happy, practice compassion. So this quality of compassion, as you'll see, is woven into this process of working through R.A.I.N. It's a very, very key ingredient in the alchemy of this powerful tool. So during times of feeling overwhelmed, and feeling overwhelmed is really part of the human experience. We all move through phases in our life where this is what we're going through. And on some level, at the time of this recording, during the coronavirus, during the addressing the systemic racism, we are all, on some level, moving through crisis. We are all probably to some degree feeling overwhelmed. We also have this climate crisis that we're moving through. So R.A.I.N is something that you can always have in your tool belt to help you move through these periods where you don't know what to do, where you feel lost, where you feel confused, where you feel inundated with stress. Sometimes subtle, other times utterly profound. R.A.I.N will help you escape the trenches of despair. So let's talk about what R.A.I.N stands for. R stands for recognize. A stands for allow. I stands for investigate. And N stands for natural loving awareness. Now, if you're unfamiliar, at interdimensiontv.com, we put the transcript up of all the podcasts that we do here at Be Ultimate. So you're welcome to go back and you can read this. You can take notes. You can do whatever you want to with those transcripts. They're there for you, like a student just studying and learning, so that Maybe you're listening right now or watching on YouTube, but just know that that resource is always there for you. So if you think about it, after the rain passes, everything is always more clear. Once the storm blows through and wipes away the residual nature of what was previously there, things become more alive and vibrant, and we have a greater sense of clarity. In the same way that we see that reflected in nature, also when we move through this 4-step process, when we get to the end, we often feel so much more a sense of peace and understanding and clarity. So it provides a profound shift in reality from where we begin the process and ultimately where we end up at the end. Dr. Wayne Dyer said, when you change the way that you look at things, the things that you look at begin to change. And on some level, that's what this is about. It's about shifting our perspective in those moments of crisis and difficulty and challenge and intensity to again have a perspective of understanding of what's really, really true. Not the illusion of what's there, not the illusion of what emotions are projecting out at us, but what exists through that illusion as we peel that away. As we peel that away, we begin to discover and we begin to see more clearly. Often in challenging situations, though, we can't see clearly because we are inundated with those negative emotions and also the chemicals of stress. And in our brain, we have the limbic part of the brain, and in those moments of crisis, the limbic part of the brain takes over. It's our fight, flight, survival system, and we're no longer able to access our higher reasoning centers of the prefrontal cortex of the brain. We've lost our ability to see clearly. We've lost our ability to have higher reasoning. This is what happens during arguments and fights. And this is what you see going on in the world. You see it all the time where one side is arguing their perspective, the other side is arguing their perspective, and people are just shouting at each other from that limbic part of the brain and nobody's listening. In order to move through difficult moments and experiences on both an individual level and also within our communities, within a global perspective, we have to learn how to down-regulate that limbic part of the brain so that we can begin to access the higher prefrontal cortex. One of the ways that we can do that is through R.A.I.N. Again, R.A.I.N stands for recognize, allow, investigate, and natural loving awareness. So let's begin to unpack each one of those letters, each one of the 4 stages. We'll start with R, recognizing what's going on. So when you're encountering a difficult situation, very often we can have all these adverse reactions. We might want to run away from it. We might want to deny it. So this is very important that we have to begin to start by recognizing what's there. Sometimes we use the phrase, name it to tame it. Name what's there. By naming what's there, by naming what you're thinking or feeling, you begin to open up the doorway of what's possible when it comes to seeing more clearly what's really going on. In shamanism, they often call it seeing the dragon, in the sense that you can't fight an enemy that you don't know is there, that you can't see. So first we have to see it, we have to name it, we have to recognize that it's there, because very often we're unconscious to what's there. So what we're experiencing is existing underneath the radar of what we know to be true. And it reminds me of this cartoon that I used to watch growing up as a kid called G.I. Joe. And they used to always say, knowing is half the battle. So half the battle is recognizing what's there. Essentially what you're doing is you're making something conscious that was previously unconscious. You're becoming aware. You're becoming aware of your thoughts. A lot of us are so identified with our thoughts, especially in times of upheaval and crisis, we're not able to step away and have the perspective to be aware of the thoughts. We're too entangled within it. So this is a process of disentanglement. Same thing with our emotions and our feelings and the sensations that we feel in the body. So what we may begin to recognize within our thoughts is that we have thoughts of worry, of frustration, of agitation. On an emotional level, we may feel and experience fear, anger, anxiety, grief, overwhelm. We may notice that we have these sensations within our body where maybe certain body parts are gripping, are tightening, squeezing, or maybe there's a pressure there. There's a temperature, a fiery heat somewhere in the body. So we can name that. We can name heat, or we can name the fear, or we can name the worry. This is that process of recognizing. And when we recognize what's there, we become more present to the moment-to-moment experience of what's happening. We're no longer thinking about yesterday. We're no longer worrying about tomorrow, because your emotions and your thoughts and your sensations are happening right now in the present moment. So you're in the now. Now let's move to the second stage of A. A is allow. Allow life. Allow what's arising for you to be just as it is. So you're not pushing it away. You're not fighting with it. You're beginning to allow it. You're beginning to give it space to breathe, to express itself. You're taking a moment to pause in the midst of the crisis to give space to what is present for you. And you're doing that for your thoughts, your feelings, your emotions, those physical sensations. Because again, very often, what do? We become reactive. So we want to push or stuff or bury or deny what's there. The things that you resist persist. But the things that you embrace, you move through with grace. Anything that we resist or push away, we just give it more power. We feed its energy. So allowing it to be there, it allows us to begin to move through what's there with that sense of greater dignity. It's like Robert Frost said, the only way out is through. We have to move through what's there, even if it's difficult, even if it's challenging, to not spiritually bypass where, again, we're pretending that it's not there. We're pretending that the anger isn't there. We're pretending that the frustration isn't there. That's the spiritual bypass. And ultimately, we can never run away from what's there. It may feel like in the short term you're escaping it, but inevitably, the way the law of karma works is we have to deal with our stuff. We have to deal with what's there, and we might as well not kick the can down the road and deal with it right now in this present moment. A phrase that you can use in this stage of allow is let go, let be. Let go, let be. And this begins to create a pathway where you begin to evolve into a different level of consciousness, of awareness to begin to arise. And as you begin to allow a different consciousness and awareness to begin to arise, now you're coming at this moment of difficulty and struggle from a different place. Again, you're shifting from that limbic part of the brain into that higher prefrontal cortex part of the brain. So you begin to say yes to what's there. If you say no, again, you're going to grip, you're going to seize up, you're going to strengthen the armor. But if you say yes, yes to this moment, yes to the emotion of the grief, of the anxiety, of the anger, of the rage, and you can repeat it gently. Yes, yes, yes. Then again, you're giving it space to exist. And every thought, every emotion, every feeling, every sensation has a beginning, a middle, and an end. None of it is permanent. It's all impermanent. They come and they go. So when you give it space, you allow it the opportunity to take its moment of life. So it's on that arc, and eventually it has to go away. Eventually it has to dissolve and subside. So the more space that you give it, the more that it can see that arc, that through line all the way through, and eventually it goes away. And there you develop a greater understanding and wisdom that you're not the emotion. You're not the fear. You're not the anger. It's like a piece of weather that just temporarily moved across the sky of your awareness. So you can imagine that as you say yes to what's there, softly and gently, and with that repetition, that each repetition diffuses the wattage of the emotion. It softens the resistance of what's there. It allows that onslaught of stress hormones and chemicals to begin to diminish. Now let's move on to the third stage of I, investigate. And to investigate with compassion. I spoke earlier about the Dalai Lama quote about the importance of that ingredient of compassion. And this is where it's very important that we investigate, and we do that with the kindness and with the compassion. So the first two steps in of themselves are game changers. But when dealing with very difficult situations, the I in R.A.I.N takes you even deeper into the experience of what's arising. Earlier, the first stage of R, recognize, we asked, or could ask, what's happening inside of me? What's present right now? Now we begin to peel those layers away even more. So the R is the surface of what's happening. The investigate, now we're going even deeper. So imagine we're going to peel the layers away by asking more questions, more inquiry. Questions like, what most needs my attention in this moment? Or, how am I experiencing what's coming up, what's arising within my physical body? Or what's the story or the narrative that I'm feeding here? A lot of us create story around things, and that just perpetuates the conflict and the drama. So having that awareness of, how am I feeding the narrative? Or what does this feeling want from me? What is it asking for? What is it calling out for? So for example, you may be in a situation where you notice an emotion, a very intense emotion like anger and rage coming up. And as you recognize the anger, R, and then you allow it to be there, the A, you begin to investigate it, the I, and realize what's under the anger. Initially on the surface, it's anger, it's rage. But as you begin to ask those questions and you begin to peel the anger away, often what we discover to be there underneath, to be the cause of the anger, is hurt, is pain. It's like you're walking through a forest, or you're walking through the woods somewhere, and you come upon the sound of a dog crying out. And you go and kneel down to help out the dog, and then it lashes out to bite you. And you jump back, you're startled, you're stunned, because here you were trying to help this wounded animal, And you realize that the reason why it lashed out at you was because its leg was caught in a trap. So the lashing out is the anger. But the anger is there because it's masking the pain, the hurt. And in the same way that we see that within the wounded animal, we also see that within ourselves. So you can imagine that as you ask these questions and you begin to investigate with kindness and compassion, it's like taking care of a dear friend or a relative or a child. And how do you meet that? How do you meet their struggle and their difficulty? You want to meet it with tremendous tenderness and kindness. And very often in this stage of R.A.I.N, we can experience the big release. This is where we might experience a big flood of tears once we realize that the anger was masking the pain and the hurt. Then we begin to have that emotional release that comes from the pain of what we're feeling. And those tears are called the tears of the way out of suffering into healing. So in the same way, you might tend to a small child. We offer that same level of support also to ourselves, because ultimately we all have that inner child within us. And that inner child needs to be honored and recognized and met with compassion. So we might say in this moment of this third stage a phrase. We may say something like, I love you. Just like you would say to a small child, I love you. I'm here for you. I'm listening. And we can repeat those phrases in the same way that we repeated gently that word yes. Yes to this moment. Yes to what's here. We can also use a physical gesture by placing the hand somewhere on the body where it feels intuitively right. That may be on top of your chest, your heart, or your belly, or wherever it feels right for you. You can also use imagery or visualization where you visualize somebody in your life that is a symbol of love and support holding you. So whatever works for you, whether that's the phrase, the gesture, the visualization, or a combination of all the above, this is how you meet what's there. This is how you meet the pain with the compassion. And then the last final fourth phase of N, natural loving awareness. Sometimes they use non-identification. Let's go with natural loving awareness in the sense that the previous steps, again, disentangle you from the challenging experience and begins to create the freedom and the spaciousness that's necessary to heal, to transform. And ultimately, we begin to move beyond the small self of fear, of stress, into that deeper dimension of who we really truly are, which is that natural loving awareness. N is like the dessert at the end of that 5-course meal. In this case would be the 4-course meal. It's like a liberating homecoming where you come back to your true nature, to who you are underneath the thoughts and the emotions and the feelings and the sensations, is that dimension of timeless loving awareness. And as we begin to access that and touch into that through the process of non-identification, we often experience great, profound moments of clarity, of wisdom, of deep understanding. The storm has passed. The rain has washed through. And then we experience the power of levity, of lightness that comes from letting go, of letting go what was there. It's like the space after the exhale. And then we simply just rest in our timeless, eternal nature. In this last 4th stage, there's nowhere to get to. There's nothing to do. We just simply allow ourselves to just be. And that's very, very powerful. It's as if you're marinating in all of the effects of what you move through the rain. Now I want to share a story to kind of tie all this in together. So I take a real life example and show you R.A.I.N in action. This is a story from a retreat that I was on last year, and it was a 14-day silent retreat. And one of the teachers on the retreat was Jack Kornfield. And there was a gentleman, an older gentleman, who was in his 70s. And he had spent the majority of his life as a judge in the court system. And we were probably about 6-7 days into the retreat, and I had noticed, and if you've been on a retreat, you'll know what I'm talking about, where you just feel other people's energy. And you're not talking, it's a silent retreat, but you're just aware of other people that are in the retreat. And you can pass people coming in and out of the meditation hall or the dining hall, and you can feel people's energy. And this particular gentleman, his energy and demeanor, we could say, was intense. The way that he would walk into the meditation hall would often be loud. It just seemed like a lack of gentleness. He would stomp into the meditation hall. He would stomp out. There was a lot of huffing and puffing. And during the meditations, a lot of sound, a lot of noise, just moving around all the time, and breath and coughing, and just a whole cacophony of sound coming from this particular gentleman. And on this particular day where Jack Kornfield was leading the meditation, at the end of the session, he offered a Q&A, so a question and answer session, and opened up the retreat so that people could ask questions. And this particular gentleman expressed to Jack his frustration with his meditation. And he was explaining how he had been on many other meditations, but for whatever reason on this meditation, he just wasn't able to access peace. And it wasn't enjoyable, and it was very unsettling and very frustrating. And Jack began to skillfully, almost like a skillful wizard, began to lead this guy through the process of R.A.I.N. And he started out by guiding this gentleman to recognize what he was feeling in the present moment, which was frustration and agitation. And even as this guy said the words, he stuttered them out. It was clear that there was stress there. It was clear that he was stuck in that limbic part of the brain. He was very agitated. And then eventually Jack took him into the second stage of allow. And he asked this guy, he said, what would happen if you just allow the frustration and the agitation to be there, to not resist it, but to embrace it and to give it space? And as Jack encouraged him to allow the emotions to be there, this guy began to shake within his body. He began to tremble. And Jack had him name it. He had him name it to tame it. What was there? He was feeling shaking in his physical body. He began to tremble. It was like the moment before the storm was about to explode. And then he took him to the next step, the step of investigation. So he began to investigate into the frustration, into the agitation, through those physical sensations of trembling and shaking. And the guy shared that he noticed that he felt blocked. He felt stuck. And Jack said, where in your body do you feel blocked? Where in your body do you feel stuck? And the guy said, my heart. And he began to shake even more. And Jack had him place his hand on top of his heart. And then he asked him, he investigated even more. He said, what's behind the block? And then this gentleman began to weep. He began to sob. He began to cry. And he cried for many, many minutes. And then Jack said, "What are you feeling now? What's there? What's underneath the blockage?" And after some time, this gentleman said pain and grief and hurt, and he had to fight hard to even express those words. He was sobbing and crying so much. And keep in mind, this is a gentleman in his 70s who had been a judge, who was intense. And here Jack was leading him into the experience of reconnecting, reuniting back to the heart. And then Jack asked him, what does it want to say? What does the pain want to say? What does the grief want to express? And again, through sobbing and crying, Bob replied, "I forgive you." And then he went on to sob uncontrollably for I don't even know how long. It was so long, and we just sat there, everybody in the retreat hall, in silence, watching almost this miracle taking place. Watching a master, a wizard, a meditation wizard of Jack Kornfield guiding this person through the process of R.A.I.N. And we just all sat there in silence, many of us also crying and weeping as well, just bearing witness to this individual suffering, but also blown away. It was breathtaking as we gave it space to all unfold the way that it needed to. And then that was us in that last fourth stage of N, of just natural loving awareness. All sitting there, not needing to rush to this man to touch him, to hug him, but to give him space to just be. And of course, eventually the tears subsided, the shaking subsided, and we all sat there, everybody in that meditation hall just connected, embraced, in that timeless, formless dimension of loving awareness, representative of that letter N of R.A.I.N. And what we went on to find out is that it turned out that Bob had been estranged from one of his daughters for many, many years. And he had found out that this particular daughter had a granddaughter who he had never gotten to meet. And he had tried multiple times to reach out to his daughter to make amends. He would send her cards around the holidays, around Christmas, sending his support and sending his love, and would never get anything back. And this was the pain that he was carrying, sometimes called the unfinished business of the heart. And after that experience, Bob went on to have a powerful retreat, because he had moved through that process of R.A.I.N. He had moved through the frustration and the blockages and address on a deep, deep level, the deepest of levels, the pain and the hurt was there. So you too can use R.A.I.N. to change the game. Maybe you're moving through a divorce or a challenging breakup in a relationship, a chronic illness, a business betrayal, a parenting challenge with a child, with a teenager, or any difficult situation. Remember that R.A.I.N. stands for recognize, allow, investigate, and natural loving awareness. Thank you so much for tuning in. I hope that you found this to be powerful, and I hope that you take these teachings and this wisdom with you into your life, and that you use it to find your sense of freedom, to deal with what's there. Because ultimately, the more that you can do that, the more that you can address the unfinished business of the heart, then the more that you can be a shining example to everybody else in your life of what's possible when we move through what's there. Thank you for tuning in. Remember to click subscribe, rate, drop a comment, leave a review if you're listening on Apple Podcasts. And now we'll finish with the ultimate prayer. May we bring strength where there is weakness. May we bring courage where there is fear. May we bring compassion where there is suffering. And may we bring light where there is darkness. May we be ultimate. Hey guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure that you click subscribe and also click the link to get those 3 amazing classes: Power Yoga, Yin Yoga, and Meditation. See you next time.